Hello and welcome back to From the Press Box, a special From the Press Box because it's the first leg of the playoffs. And joining me, a man who's already made a debut appearance on the YouTube channel this season, Simon Parker from the Telegraph and Argus in Bradford. Simon, nervous, excited? Do you
Well,
not
it's been
care?
a while. Been a while since I spoke to you, Mark. So in that time, I think, to be honest, from this end, I wouldn't. I think the phrase "free hit" is probably wrong, but they've had such a good season considering they've come up from League Two. I think you feel like this is a bit of bonus time in a sense. They've earned this because they've had such a good season, and anything from here would just be fantastic. In terms of the season as a whole, I don't think it'll be defined on what happens in the next couple of weeks from a Bradford City point of view. But obviously, having said that, can they crown what's been an unbelievable year by taking it to the next level?
Yeah, I don't think you're alone on that. I think Stevenage probably would say something similar. Stockport, maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's a bit more pressure. Yeah. Definitely pressure on Bolton. But you're in a luxurious position in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, there's two teams who very much, obviously Bolton have been trying for several years to get out this league, lost in a final. Stockport have been knocking on the door for the last couple of years. So, those are the teams you sort of sense, the spotlight is on. And Bradford City, obviously, size of the fan base still puts that pressure on, but you haven't got that sort of bookies mantle sort of thing. And as for Stevenage, I don't think anyone saw that coming. So fair play to them. They've got they may not be the greatest team to watch every week, but they're very good at what they do, and they've earned their shot at it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, that one. I think I'm going to enjoy watching Stevenage for the first time this season when they play against Stockport, because I've got a funny feeling that they get through to Wembley. I don't know what it is. I just think they beat Stockport over two legs in either Bolton or Bradford, which is a very 50-50 call in my view. Is going to Wembley to try and beat them on the big pitch. So that'd be interesting. You mentioned the word underdog and favourite there. So I'm going to bring you back to a story you did this week with Anthony Sarcevic. Yeah. I knew Sarce would get involved this week. And he's chipped up and said Bradford shouldn't be the underdogs, which I think I know where he's coming from without question. But is that inevitable? Does he he doesn't have a say in it, but I don't think Bolton have a say in being the favourites either.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, it was funny actually, because I spoke to about 10 minutes after Graham Alexander, who was saying, we know we're the underdogs. But yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of size of clubs, in terms of size of club as a League One club, probably fair enough. Bolton have obviously, I think, is it 5 years they've been in League One now? Yeah. They've been desperately trying to get out back to the Championship. So I think they were inevitably always going to be, the shortest price with the bookies. I mean, does that mean anything? Probably not. I don't know what, going back to Stevenage, I don't know what their odds were at the start of the season to be top six. I can't imagine they'd have been, in that first group. So, I think it's inevitable also because Bradford ultimately are still a newly promoted side. I might be 9 months on, but this is their first season back. So, but it's very marginal, isn't it? We talk about 50-50. I mean, as Sarce pointed out, over the league table, Bradford City finished higher than Bolton Wanderers, and you can't argue with that. The league table doesn't lie, as the cliche goes. So, from that point of view, he's not exactly sort of, bigging up his team unnecessarily. So, but when you look at the table itself, I think, was it Graham Alexander made a point that all four have been up there virtually all season in and around it, and so it's no one's made a late surge. So it's almost a case of, in terms of where the league table's been from over the months, it's not a huge surprise, is it? Because they've basically been in that pack, these four, from very early days. So which means it's, on paper it looks very tight because they've all been in and around much of a much-ness, for so long.
Yeah, I think we've got Stevenage to thank for that late goal.
Yeah, you want that to define your season. Yeah.
Jack Wilshere's face was a picture. He was not a happy chappy, I've got to say, after that game. But just to go back to Sarce, how important it is to have him back and playing for Bradford, because he's got that, to use the modern phrase, aura about him.
Yeah, he's huge, isn't it? I mean, we've all tried to count how many promotions he's had, and you tend to lose count because there've been so many. But he's always involved. I mean, I had a chat with him the other week about when was the last time he finished a season where just playing out time, sort of getting ready to go on the beach, and he couldn't remember. It's literally about a decade, I think, since he was last involved in a end of season that meant nothing. Which is incredible on his part. But because he's been there and done that, and he's so often chipped in with goals on those occasions, it's that big game mentality is huge. There's a lot of experience in Bradford City squad, to be fair. You go through the dressing room, and I think every single one of them has been involved in playoffs. But when you've got someone who's been involved in so many promotion campaigns and so many sort of nail biters towards the end of the season, it's got to be a huge advantage. And getting him back, it's a lift for everybody. And you could see the supporters last week when the team was announced. It was like, it just put you in a good place for it.
The weird thing is, I think certainly when he played at Bolton and came up with Bolton from League Two, there were question marks of whether he's going to do it in League One and whether he could play that higher level. And I think they've been aimed at him a lot, and he has gone back down and come back up quite a few times now in his career. But this just feels like he's playing the best football of his career. It's certainly the most productive football of his career. Is it just right place, right time?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, Bradford City's social media had a bit of fun last week. I mean, they used the phrase "in League One" with Sarce quite a bit, all in italics, because I think there was a bit of a dig at Stockport, who weren't sure, which is why he came here in the first place. I mean, Bradford City offered him a 2-year deal. I think Stockport offered him a 1-year deal because there was all question marks over whether he could do it in League One, as you say. And he certainly answered them quite emphatically this year. But it seems to suit him. I mean, he's got a manager who he loves and loves him. I mean, obviously they go back to Fleetwood when Graham was first starting off as a manager, and he brought Anthony Sarcevic, and it was and he was his big game player at the time for there. So they've had a relationship that's obviously lasted over many years. He's tried to sign him several times since. So when he grabbed the chance to bring him here, and it's been a marriage made in heaven, really. I mean, the only thing that's held him back is Sarce has had injury issues, certainly last season. Not so much this year, but that there's been the question marks of whether how many games he could play. But the fact he's finished their top scorer with 11 this season, and he's played more often than not, and he's been involved in all the sort of the big pressure games, and which is why he's such a big player going into these.
I take my cap off to him and really do. He's been fantastic this season for Bradford. And like you say, there's a lot of playoff experience in there. I mean, weirdly enough, you mentioned there he played at Fleetwood. He scored the winner for Fleetwood to take him up against Burton for Graham Alexander's Fleetwood. And sitting on the bench that day was Stephen Schumacher. Didn't get on the pitch. Lovely story. And you were telling me that Grez has obviously played in the Preston team that Bolton beat at the Millennium Stadium a long time ago.
I mean, he sort of mentions about good and bad experiences of the playoffs, and that must have been a pretty low because they got absolutely whipped that day, didn't they? So, I mean, I obviously I don't remember it to hand, but having read the reports, it sounded like he had a bit of a struggle that day against
Ricardo Gardner.
Yeah, Ricardo Gardner. So But I think there's lots of stories in this, and there's a lot of link between these two clubs, and you don't have to dig too hard to find good lines there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of experience, loads of playoff tales. But from your end, injury wise, is there any cheering up? Because you're still missing Poynton and Wright last time I looked.
Yeah, I mean they're still out. There's talk of they might get him back, because obviously they're both desperate to get back. I mean, Bobby Poynton, I spoke to the manager during the week, and he was sort of saying if Bobby Poynton's got a chance, it'd probably be more for the second leg. Tyreek Wright, probably a similar timeline. I mean, they might try and rush one through and get them involved this weekend, but it would be a big ask, particularly the first leg. They might think it might be more sensible to give them those few more days longer, and obviously you then got the home match with the home sort of atmosphere, and also you then, that's when the tie reaches its boiling point, isn't it? It might be a case of, is it worth taking such a big risk for part one when you've still got part two to come? So, but other than those two, they got a clean bill of health from last week, and obviously Sarce is back in now. He came back in last week, so yeah, it's just the two of them, and it's just a case of when they decide to take the gamble.
Yeah, just a final one then before I let you go and have some peace before I speak to you again tomorrow. first leg for Bradford, how do you see it? I mean, Bolton fans seem to think this is Bolton's big chance to kind of lean into that home form. The fact that Bradford haven't been magnificent away from home this season, and maybe get that lead to defend at Valley Parade. Is any good result a good result, if you know what I mean, for Bradford?
Well, I think I'm not sure how much the advantage of home and away is going to play in this, to be honest. I mean, yeah, you sort of say, you mentioned Bradford City's away record. It's a weird one because they actually finished, their away record was 8th best, only a point behind Bolton's.
Yeah, exactly.
It was because it was in different sections. They had a very good first half where they only lost 1 and 9, then a dreadful second bit from January through to March when they lost 7 out of 8. But then they finished they finished with a win at Wickham. It should have been a win at Barnsley where they took their eye off the ball late in stoppage time against 10 men. And then they won very comfortably at Exeter last week, in which was a winner takes all, obviously, given Exeter's situation. So I don't think their away form is something that's a huge sort of concern as much as, it might have been a couple of months ago. But yeah, I don't think they'll sit and park the bus because that's not in their nature. So I think, I don't see a big home advantage either way, to be honest, at this tie, because, they're both used to playing in big crowds. It's not like it's going to be an eye-opener for anybody, is it? So, but, I think there'll be goals. If I was a betting man, I'd say goals both sides tomorrow. But, I wouldn't give you a scoreline because I wouldn't have a clue.
No, me and you both, mate. I just have to look down Twitter and you'll know that we've not got any clue about anything. It's
over many, many years of cluelessness.
Absolutely. Well, we'll both be clueless together in the press box tomorrow night. It's just a shame this isn't at Wembley, to be honest. I think it would have been great to see the two fan bases meet at Wembley and have that big stage.
We've all talked about the ticket scenario, and both sides giving each other sort of 2,000, which you understand they want to give them the minimum they have to, but it does mean a lot of people have been disappointed, which is a shame because a lot of those people would have been to, most games and they're missing out. And as you say, at Wembley, it would have been a fantastic. Imagine what the attendance might have been, and without being disparaging against anyone in particular. Well, obviously Stevenage, but if they get there, there'll be big holes at Wembley, which there probably wouldn't have been if these two have been facing each other there.
Yeah, you could almost hear the EFL salivating, couldn't you? If that were the case, but such is life. It will have to be the playoffs. I'm sure we'll be thinking about this game for a long time to come. Hopefully, everything goes a-okay. And they're the best team. I think there's a bit of respect. I think there's not just me and thee, but I think there's been a decent relationship between the clubs.
There's been no silliness, has there? And they've been, in terms of the two league, obviously the EFL Trophy was a bit of a wumping, but the two league games, the ones that mattered were, well, you couldn't sort of separate either side, were you? They were both very hard fought. It was not a case of one was lucky to snatch a point. I think they were both fair results, and it looks the archetypal 50-50 tie, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I just hope we get a couple of repeats of the game at Valley Parade the other week. It was a cracking game of football, really. So, fingers crossed. Right, I'm going to go and probably do more videos and possibly take down this blooming green screen which has dominated my kitchen for the last couple of hours.
Well, I'm going to go and feed my dog because she's kicking off behind me now. So. She's going to get louder if I don't sort her out.
Happy days. Mind your fingers, Simon. Thanks very much for joining us.
See you tomorrow, Mark. Cheers.
Cheers.